so I just click the button, but that is probably going to take a little bit of while for some people to come on in to the webinar. But I don't think there's any reason why we don't get started with some introductions and pleasantries and stuff. So I love doing this webinar, and Shane and Vida, I know you guys from work, and Valerie, I know you from the internet. I know you from the Facebook groups. And
Yep.
This is actually the first time I've ever had a chance to speak with you in person. So I am looking forward to this. I really don't know either one of your stories. And my favorite part of this is getting to know people's stories. Every time I go out to do deliveries of new machines, or I go out and do a maintenance run and visit people's homes. I've been in thousands of people's homes over the years with the Gammill stuff, and I'm always interested to ask people some of the very same questions I'm going to ask you today, because you never know, and people's stories are very, very interesting to me, and oftentimes they're pretty inspiring too. It helps you to see what people can do when they have a dream and decide to follow it. So it is a little bit of a coin flip here, but I think I'm going to start with Shane and Vida first, and then we'll take 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that, and then we'll go on to Valerie. So there's plenty of time to answer the questions. And Vida, I expect you to correct Shane many times during this.
Yeah.
I'll answer second. That'll make it easy.
Let me refer to my questions here. So first off, Shane, where's home for you guys? What part of the country are you in?
We're in Missoula, Western Montana, right on the Clark Fork River.
Okay. How long have you been long arm quilting?
Well, Shane just started long arm quilting with me. I've been long arm quilting for almost 2 years now.
Okay.
I've been stitching off machines for a year.
Okay. Right. So 2 years, that's not a real long time. Had you been a quilt top piecer before then?
I started piecing quilt tops and started looking to buy a long arm in 2018 and 2019.
Okay. That's a lot quicker than most people's path. So somehow you just kind of, what happened? How did you decide to get into this?
I fell in love with it.
Did you have friends that were quilters?
I fell into a quilters guild here in Missoula, and of course COVID happened, so we were stuck in the house and not a whole lot of outlets and that sort of thing. And actually in between 2020 and 2021, we had closed our in-home daycare and we were making masks. I had already been sewing and making clothing and teaching all kinds of handcrafts, but hadn't really picked up quilting yet. And I was uniquely positioned with my website and other things to provide masks during COVID. And so between March of 2020 and late 2021, the last time I checked my shop, we made and sold over 18,000 masks.
Wow.
Through our little shop, and we were doing them in the basement of our house. And shortly after, I had gotten a contract to make some for the state of Montana for their visitors centers. I told Shane that I wanted to take some of that money and buy a long arm, and he said yes. I didn't want to get too into the piecing till I could quilt it myself.
Right. So that kind of leads me into my next question, which was, what made you decide to long arm? Was it the cost of having your quilts done by somebody else, or?
Yeah, some of it was the cost. Plus, when I look at something that I made, I like to know that I made it from start to finish. Okay. I really didn't want to make something and have somebody else quilt it for me, because I wanted to be be able to have the satisfaction of knowing that I had selected the pattern, selected the fabric, made it, and quilted it myself.
Mhm. But at that point, you had no intention of turning it into some kind of business?
Oh, I absolutely wanted to make it a business. I knew that there was a demand in our area for long arm quilting. And so I told Shane, I said, this for me could be the next chapter, because we were already looking at ways to close our daycare. And so, and wanting to do something different, because the whole reason that Shane had done the daycare to begin with was because he wanted to be a stay-at-home dad after a divorce. And so we were looking to, start a new chapter in our lives because the kids were gone. And so I just thought that quilting was going to be my new chapter, and we needed to figure out what Shane was going to do. So I did go into it intending to do it as a business.
Gotcha. Shane, do you have anything you need to add to what she said?
Well, I was keenly interested and hopeful that it would be a viable income, because my fallback was food and beverage. And that was the last place that I wanted to be, was back in restaurants. Terrible hours, it's hard work. So I was encouraged at the response right away, and seeing how people were using them to essentially, create a cottage industry.
Yeah. So when Vida said, I've got this harebrained idea to buy a machine and I can make some money with it, what was your obviously that had to hit you some way or another. How did it hit you?
Well,
Be honest.
it was more or less just kind of hold on, because I knew it was going to happen. I mean, she is a unique person in that when she decides, she can create kind of this momentum. and it didn't seem that far-fetched, the more that we talked about it. And apart from the upfront cost for the machine, or the arranging the financing for it, it's a lot less than a lot of other ventures that you would get into. So
that's a good point. You're not going to buy a McDonald's franchise for that.
Right,
No.
right. And you checked off a lot of the boxes. We have a beautiful home that we want to enjoy. And neither of us really wanted to get back into kind of a 9 to 5 thing, or I'd never really had that. I just knew I didn't want it. So this was worth the risk.
So you made the choice to get a Gammill as opposed to other brands.
That wasn't the one we started out with.
Actually, Shane's first response to me was, buy what you can pay cash for with the money that you got from the state. And so I did. I bought another brand. I bought their top of the line, every bell and whistle. And 8 months later, I was a very unhappy camper.
This is part of your story I had no idea about.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't like quilting on it. It was loud. I didn't have control over the patterns. I was very, very frustrated. And then I was introduced to Judy Niemeyer patterns, and Shane encouraged me to go to Judy Niemeyer retreat here in Montana.
The Quilt Works.
Yep.
Yep.
And I met Judy, and she was quilting on a Gammill.
I believe she has 3 Statlers, if I recall. I've been to her place.
Well, she was quilting on a Gammill Statler, and we didn't even get through the whole week, and she approached me about becoming certified to teach her patterns. And when I went to visit with her, part of our conversation revolved around my frustrations about my current machine. And she very patiently listened to me. The Gammill. Everything that you just told me you're frustrated about will be solved if you were stitching on a Gammill. And so I came home from the retreat and I told Shane, Judy says I need a Gammill. You can't argue with Judy Niemeyer.
No, you really can't. No.
And to his credit, he said yes. And 3 days later, we were ordering my Gammill Statler.
Okay, interesting. So when you started, you did start with a computerized machine, but it wasn't a Gammill. And
Correct.
then you went to the Statler, which is our computerized machine. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And then last year we bought a plus machine
Okay.
and with the full intention of
Retrofitting it.
retrofitting it.
Yeah,
So
so
now-
for anyone who's not aware, when he says he bought a plus machine, that's a machine that would have been built sometime between probably like 97 and like 2010 or something. That would have been a hand guided only machine, fully loaded, all the options. They had a lot of features like the stitch regulator and stuff, but by today's standards, pretty antiquated. But interestingly enough, a plus machine will still outstitch just about everything on the market that's not a Gammill.
Yeah.
But so you had gotten that one with the intention of doing what with it?
Retrofitting it to be a Statler.
Okay, so you'd have a
Found it
second.
on the secondary market,
Mhm.
not far from us. And I told Shane that I really thought that I knew that people were driving all the way to Helena, which is 2.5 hours away from us, to rent a machine from a different brand. And I told him, I said, why do we not buy another machine and rent them here so that people don't have to drive all the way to Helena to rent a machine? And so,
you're very clever because you're still working from home and you're still enjoying that beautiful retreat
Yep.
that you've made for yourself, and it's other
Yep.
people that have to come to you.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Because you get some snow there. I've been there.
Yes, and so when the snow flies, these women don't want to drive through. They have to drive through a mountain pass to get to Helena, and it can get treacherous.
Yeah.
So
So
And then
let's
the other Statler was upgraded to an Ascend. So now we have a Statler and an Ascend.
okay, so that was the other question that I just had, but you just answered it, which is, do you have the same machine today that you started with, or have you traded up or added an upgrade to it? So you took the regular Statler that you started with, and then you added the Ascend upgrade,
correct.
okay?
And
And
then-
I just a question, do you run the machine faster than you used to because of the increased accuracy, or do you run it about the same speed but just smile real big at how perfect everything looks?
So the Send is my original machine, which was new when I purchased it. And I predominantly use it to do custom work. So I'm enjoying the precision over the speed.
Mhm.
And then I use the retrofit to run edge to edge quilts in the background while I'm working on the customs.
Mhm. How did you know that there was enough long arm business available there in your town to support another long arm quilter?
Well,
It's kind of nosy.
I kind of nosy. Well,
Just
I-
finds out, you know, you ask and then you get the answer.
Yeah,
And that's what you have to do.
that's exactly what I did. Is a shop owner here in town where a lot of long armors pick up and drop off quilts. She asked me if I was going to be doing that sort of thing because she wanted to send me quilts. And one of the things that she has a hard time finding is people who are willing to do the custom quilting. She can find plenty of people willing to do the edge to edge. It's the custom quilts that are hard to find. And one Saturday, I just happened to pop into a class at her shop. And for hours, there were these women coming in and out of the shop to a closet and picking up quilts and dropping off quilts. And I came home and I told Shane, I was like, she's not kidding. There's a lot of long arm business in this
Mhm.
area. So
Yeah.
And then we find out that a couple of them are, you know, they're no longer interested in taking in as many quilts as they have in the past.
Yeah. That
So,
happens many
being
times.
selective
I've
for the-
observed.
not the time.
Yeah. All the people whose homes I've been in, I've noticed many times that somebody might be 60 years of age and they get into long arm quilting and they have a fantastic 5, 10, 15, 20-year run. And then, 20 years later, they're now 80 and they've earned money they never thought they were going to earn and done a lot of things. And now they're, slowing down, right? So they switch
Sure.
over to doing them just for friends and family and their favorite customers and things like that. Yeah, interesting.
Mhm.
How did you find the customers to grow your business? That was from the quilt shop.
No, actually, this particular quilt shop owner wants to decide what you charge
Mhm.
to do quilting, and I was not about that. I was like, this is not a charity. I can't do it for what you want me to charge. So I have yet to ever get a quilt from that quilt shop. Instead, what I did was I first took in every free quilt that I could take in, comfort quilts, you know, for Quilts of Valor quilts and that sort of thing to practice. And I, you know, lowered my prices a little bit cheaper than the rest of the market and started getting customers. And actually today, most of my customers are mailing me quilts.
Really?
I do have local customers, but I get a lot of mailed quilts, custom quilts.
Mhm. How did you come up with the money to buy your machine?
Well,
Because the first one was what you could afford. The second
Right.
one was beyond what you
So-
could afford.
right. So it was only 8 months old. So we sold it.
And it was also at that time when everything was difficult to get.
Yes.
You know, we were still in the supply issues with COVID at the end of COVID, and they wanted a long arm. So we were able to recoup decent, you know, money back from it. And then we just applied that.
And then we also had Shane as a thrifter, and I had a quite expensive stash of apparel fabrics, vintage apparel fabrics and wools that people were looking for. And so I sold them to finance the new machine. I cleaned out, was like, I'm not going to be doing that kind of sewing. So why do I need to hang on to that stuff?
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
if you look at
something
the
I've never
closet, it
heard of
doesn't look like
before.
we cleaned out. It's a way of replenishing itself.
So, did you have another job while you were starting your long arm business? How long did you do both jobs before you did full-time quilting?
The last 2 years, we still had a daycare in our home.
But it was running at
6
no,
kids.
yeah,
it was
so
6 kids a day.
less than 50% of what it was before.
Yeah.
These were just a few of our very close clients.
But they were 6 kids under the age of 4. Yeah.
It
So
still doesn't sound like a lot when you had 12 under the age of 4.
yeah, it's true. But
So,
yeah, it was, you know, they took a nap on the floor next to the machine and I quilted, and they got used to the sound of that machine and they slept right through it.
I bet.
and then on May 12th of this year, after 23 years, we were able to close the daycare down.
Mhm. How did that feel?
Pretty good, as you can imagine.
It did feel pretty good, didn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't have been surprised if it had been a little bit emotional too. I closed a store, a business that I had opened and run and grew it from nothing, you know. And it was a feeling of relief very much because it wasn't any longer what I wanted to do with my life.
Sure.
But it was also a little bit emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, those last few kids, we were very close to their parents, so we miss them. We see them every once in a while, but certainly not as often. But most days about 8 o'clock in the morning, if we're both here, we're like, there's no kids here.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
You're pretty. So these days, about how many hours a week do you spend doing quilts for other people?
So now both the machines are not in the house. They're in a detached, what used to be a detached garage that's finished out. And so I call this my studio. And most days by 8 or 9 in the morning, I come out here and I'm here. I quilt until about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And then I call it a day.
Okay. the first part of what you said cut off, but I think what I basically gathered at the end was that you're quilting a full work day every day.
Yes, yes. Mhm.
Okay, okay. So do you do some edge to edge in addition to the custom?
Yes. I run some, if I have edge to edge quilts to run, I set them up on the second machine. And then while they're running, I work on the custom quilts.
Okay, okay, that's very efficient. Do you charge by the hour or by the square inch, or how do you do that?
Square inch for all of it.
Okay, just a different rate for
Yes.
custom.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. What would you say your total charge for an average queen size quilt is? And I know you're gonna probably give me a couple different numbers, right?
Right. So if we're talking a custom, I have a custom Judy Niemeyer on my long arm right now, and it's going to bill out about $1,100 to $1,200 when it's done.
Okay.
And that's a lot of stitch in the ditch and custom placement of all the patterns. And then, but the average quilt that we do just every day, edge to edge, runs between $150 to $300, depending on the size of the quilt.
Mhm.
And if I don't have a custom on the machine, then I'll run both the machines with edge to edge. So I
Okay.
can double up.
And you had mentioned that when you first started doing quilting and you were gaining customers, that you kind of underpriced a little bit.
No, I did not underprice. The shop owner wanted me to underprice, and I said no.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, she wanted me to charge what I thought was a ridiculous amount of money. And I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, you have to value your own time and
I
time.
have to, that's what I told her. I said, I have to value my time. And I also have to, you have to understand that their quilt is not just getting quilted, it's getting quilted on the best machine on the market. And I'm paying for that machine. So
Right.
can't do that.
Right. So you don't have a long track record to answer this question off of, just a couple of years really. But this question is about how many quilts or how much revenue, sorry, did you do in your worst year, and then how about in your best year?
Oh, well, I guess this year has been our best year. And it's hard to answer that question because I also have an online shop where I sell Judy Niemeyer kits and patterns and that sort of thing. But this year we're tracking to $20,000 a year in my online shop.
So did you say a $20,000 year in the shop?
Mm-hmm.
And then
And
how much
that
quilting?
doesn't include all the quilting. So some of the quilts get billed through the shop if they're mailed in, but if they're local quilts, they're not going to roll into that because they usually write me a check or whatever. So I would estimate that this year we're probably tracking at about 6,000 or 7,000 on quilts. But I've also been very busy and had to say no to some quilts, and because I've been traveling with the tour and that sort of thing. So
Okay, all right. I was able to see, I'm still learning how to use the dumb computer. So I was able to see somebody ask a question that I thought was a really good one from the audience. And that
okay.
was on that $1,200 Judy Niemeyer custom quilt. About how long is that quilt going to be on the frame from start to finish?
So this one will be on the frame longer because I have to stop and travel.
Okay.
But the one before it that was just like it, I worked on it for 6 days, about 8 hours a day.
Okay. And that's why a lot of people aren't willing to do custom, but you were doing edge to edges on your other machine at the same time.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
right. So you were basically double dipping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also when you think about it, if you're billing out $1,100 or $1,200 on one quilt a week, I mean, if you did 4 of those a month, that's pretty good money.
It's decent money, absolutely.
Very decent money.
Yep, especially considering you can do it in your pajamas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. I'm gonna skip a couple questions just because I want to make sure that we can come back to them if we need to. What was the hardest part of growing your business?
what do you think the hardest part was? I think the hardest part, I didn't realize it at the time when I thought I was doing a really good job of multitasking with the daycare. And now that I don't have that pulling me away, I realized that it really was not easy to multitask that way. I didn't have a problem finding customers. And I didn't have a difficult time learning how to use the Statler with the resources that Gammill gives you. So probably the hardest part has just been being able to dive into it as much as I want to without being distracted by other things.
Okay. What is one change in technology that makes it easier today than when you started?
In the technology. Well, the technology hasn't changed all that much, and I'm still using
In
the
2
same.
years.
Yeah, in 2 years. But I will say that for me, as far as across brands, the Statler software, the CS7 software, gives me so much control over the patterns and over customizing everything that it's so much easier to quilt the quilt. It's faster. I don't spend near as much time placing the patterns and setting everything up. And then, of course, I am confident when I hit start quilting that what gets stitched is a quality stitch, and I'm not spending time dinking around with tension on my threads.
Yeah, that is a big difference. I do believe that a lot of times people who have only had a Gammill, they're not aware of how much tension trouble people with other brands have. They assume that because they've had this much tension trouble in 20 years,
Oh,
that
absolutely.
everybody else's experience is the same. And that's not the case with other brands, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, I was so frustrated with that other machine. I wanted to roll it out and push it in the river.
Yeah, that ties into my story of how I got to the Gammill world, because I used to sell those other things. So, who was your biggest cheerleader or support system? Was that your husband?
It was Shane.
Yeah,
It was Shane.
Yep. He must have gone to deal with the dog or something.
He ran the dogs are freaking out because of the storm. He'll be right back. He's coming this way. I can see him. If you have a
I've
question.
been noticing his worried looks in that direction.
Well, he's watching the storm out there.
So what kind of impact has the quilting money and the control of your personal schedule made in your life?
Oh, well, the quilting money obviously allowed us to close the daycare. It's also allowed us to take care of some debt. And so we have more choices about what we're doing and what we're not doing. And now, without the daycare being open, when I'm not quilting and when Shane is home, we're able to spend our day the way that we want to spend it. So it means we get to go camping or fishing. And when the snow flies, it just means I'll get to make some more quilts.
Cool. What is something that you wish someone would have told you when you first started?
Don't put the machine in the basement.
I've told a lot of people that, actually.
It was so easy going in because we were able to put the truck in and wheel it off in one piece in there. And then we didn't have that option on the way out. So it's a big move.
Yeah.
I wish somebody had told me not to waste my time on any other brand.
Well, that was that.
Yeah. A lot of times people are just, they're constrained by their budget, and they also feel as though the other one, like, it looks like it will work. Like, they demonstrate it and it obviously functions, and people obviously buy them and use them.
Well, you know what I think puts people at a disadvantage, and this is just my opinion after attending QuiltCon this year. I'd never been to a quilt show, a big quilt show where there were long arm companies demoing machines. And I told Shane, I said, you can't hear how rickety those other brands are in that big room because there's so much noise going on that it masks the lack of quality in the other machines. If you just had all the long arms lined up in a room that was quiet and had everybody run them, it would be so obvious to people
Yeah.
the difference.
Yeah.
Because my first machine went in the basement and it was so loud, I would leave the room while it was stitching. When I got my Gammill, it went in the dining room right next to the living room, and we could sit and watch TV and have a conversation while the machine was running.
Mhm. Yep. So that was 2 years ago when you first started, and what advice would you give to someone who wants to kind of follow in your footsteps, do the same kind of things that you did? Do you believe that it's still even possible in 2023 because you started during the pandemic?
I do, because I know that there's still long wait times for people waiting for quilts to be done. And I know that there's some very small shops up in the Mission Valley that have purchased very inexpensive machines, and people are mailing them quilts from all over the country. So there is still a very heavy demand. My advice to them would be to move heaven and earth to get a Gammill. If you're really serious, then you have to do whatever is possible in order to make sure that you have a machine that really will allow you to do this as a business. And I would tell them, when I do demos for people, I always tell them the story about Judy telling me to get a Gammill. And the other thing that she said to me after she told me to buy a Gammill was, she said, if you really want to be taken seriously as a long arm quilter, you need to be quilting on a Gammill. And if you've got a Gammill, people will give you their quilts to quilt.
Mm-hmm.
Because just the fact that you're quilting on a Gammill communicates to people that you're serious about what you're doing and that their quilt is in good hands.
Interesting.
And I don't think you can be shy about going and finding where the people are at, where the people who need their pieces quilted. And you have to go to the quilt shops, and you have to be involved in the quilt guilds and the charity groups, and you can't be shy about
promoting
saying,
yourself.
I'm new to this, but I'm willing to learn. I'm doing all the work.
Would you share with me something that, like, let's just say that you went to a quilt guild, right? And you're there for the meeting and they have show and tell. Can you give me an example of early on what kind of thing you might have said or done so that other people in the room knew that you were offering quilting?
He's laughing already, and I am too. I was dumb enough to accept the position as president of the guild.
Pretty much sight unseen. And
they asked me if anybody else wanted to do it, and they were like, would you do it? And I was like, sure. And then I made sure every meeting I had a quilt to show.
Gotcha. So you would hold it up and say, hey, this is
I made it and I quilted it.
Oh, your own quilts.
Oh, my own quilts.
Okay.
And then I made sure that if I quilted something for somebody else, that I shared a picture of it before I sent it out. If they didn't live here in town and they weren't going to be coming to the meeting, I started a virtual show and tell on our Facebook page. So I got a chance to show it to the guild, even though I was going to be mailing it out.
But there's so many different groups with hand stitchers and the Quilts of Valor and all of these smaller groups that are getting together and the conversation.
Get involved.
Well, we've had many people come out here just to see the machines or see the space and do a little bit of quilting for the charity groups, and they know somebody who knows somebody who needs quilts done.
Yep.
And maybe.
And if you're not super busy on your machine and you're still trying to build, a really good thing to do as far as fostering goodwill is volunteer to let a charity group come and borrow your machine. You teach them how to set up an edge to edge, or you can do it yourself. But I ran out of time. I was stretched so thin that what I did was I said, I can't quilt it for you, but if you want to come, I will show you how to set up an edge to edge and you can borrow my machine. And I let Quilts of Valor come once or twice a month to quilt their quilts at no charge.
I've not heard of that before. I just wanted to say, it was brought to my attention that I do have some questions, other questions from people who've been viewing. Jean asked, how many quilts a week are you doing on your two machines?
So, usually I have one custom on, and then on the edge to edge, we'll do 3, 4, 5 quilts a week, depending.
Okay. Sherilyn asked, how did you determine that your quilting was at the level that you could offer custom quilting?
Well, if I was happy with it, and Judy Niemeyer asked me to make a quilt, the latest technique of the month, and to quilt it. And when she did that, then I was like, okay, if she's happy with it, then I guess everybody else can be happy with it.
So how long had you had your Statler before you were at that level?
A year, about a year.
Just a little over a year.
A year, okay.
But she immersed herself in it. I mean, she was, by the time it was set up, she had already gone through all of the trainings.
Yeah.
And she was ready to put a quilt on it on day one.
Right.
And that's not everybody wants to do it that way. But yeah, she was very anxious, chomping at the bit.
So somebody asked, there's a quilter in my town with 3 machines, and she's 6 weeks out on orders. What's the best way to direct some of those quilters to my shop if they don't want to wait?
Advertise that they don't have to wait.
And what do you mean by advertise? Because we're not taking out an ad in the nickel saver.
No. So the cheapest way to set up something to let people know is a Facebook business page.
Okay.
Set up a
You
Facebook
just
business.
mentioned stuff at Guild, right? Because
And then you go to Guild.
the Quilters Grapevine is super fast.
Yep.
And if you turn a quilt around in a week
Or 3
And
days.
it's good.
they will be, and it's good. You think they're not going to talk about it?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
They'll be like, well, here's another one. I mean, Vida got a customer in Washington, and before her first one was in the mail back to her, she had already sent 3 more in the mail, because
Alright.
it was basically the turnaround on it was, well, okay, let's get these done.
There
I've
are
been
a lot
waiting
of
for a long time.
long arm quilters that have way more business than they can keep up with. Got 2 more. No, the other one got answered already. Hi to Vida. I took her course in Orlando. What would you prioritize picking out a used machine to get started? The size of the machine and the age, or other favorite details you think are important? And what do you think the best size table is?
Well, I'll be honest with you. When I started looking at used machines, I called Gammill Sales and I talked to Heather Cartwright, and she kind of advised me on what I should be looking at if I wanted the ability to do a retrofit.
Okay.
So that's what I would advise you to do. If there's machines out there that you're looking at, then contact Gammill and get the information on the machine so that you make sure that you purchase something you can do a retrofit on, if that's what you're wanting to do.
We do get calls on a regular basis. Many people might not know this. We get calls from people who have a machine they are selling, like, for example, mom passed away and we're selling mom's machine, but we don't know what it's worth. So they call us so that we can give them an idea of what that machine should sell for. And then on the other side, we get the potential buyer calling us saying, hey, I saw the ad for this machine. I'm not entirely sure if it's the right kind of machine even that I want.
Sure.
I'm not sure either if it's a good price. So, but in addition, you can buy your used machine from Gammill directly.
Right.
And many people choose to do that because then they get the warranty and the new owner training and all that good stuff. So, yeah. Okay, that's all I had for those questions and stuff. Shane and Vida, thank you. I went longer by about 9 minutes over what I was going to, but I love people's stories and I just couldn't stop. Hang around with us because
I want to hear the next one.
That's right, Valerie's story's coming up. So Valerie, this is going to be easy for you because I'm kind of going to ask basically the same questions of you. So where's home for you?
Currently, I am in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Okay,
That's right on the Indiana-Illinois line.
okay. So we're in the same time zone.
No, we're not.
Oh, we're not. Okay, you're
No,
one over.
I'm on Eastern time.
Gotcha.
But I just moved to Indiana last month, so I've only been here for about 4 weeks. I came here from Tucson, Arizona.
Uh-huh. Um,
And your studio is already looking very, very good.
Yeah.
This place got put together before the house got unpacked.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Priorities.
Yes, indeed.
you've got priorities, absolutely. So how long have you been long arm quilting, Val?
I got my first machine in 2012. And my first machine, sadly, was not a Gammill. I bought what I thought I could afford to pay cash for, and I had it for about 10 months, and it was in the shop about 5 months. And as soon as I got it back from the company, I put it up for sale and I sold it, and I went and bought a Gammill. So I got my first Gammill in 2013.
Okay, all right. 2013. So when you got your first one, obviously, this was where you made the decision to start long arm quilting. What made you decide to do that? What was happening in your life to make you want to do that?
My story is a little complex, but I'll try to make it very, very short. I used to be an officer for the state of Indiana, and I was shot on the job in 1998. And fast forward several years, I knew I wasn't going to be able to go back and do that line of work again. So I started looking for something different. And that's when I fell into quilting, just absolutely by accident. I was looking for a hobby, looking for something to fill some time, because I had a lot of recovery time on my hands, and that gets pretty lonesome and kind of boring. So I jumped into quilting, like piecing. And as I got into that, I realized it was very difficult for me to explain to other people, other quilters, long armers, what I wanted done to my quilts, because I always saw myself more of an artist than a quilter. And it was very hard to translate the vision that I had in my mind into quilt talk. So finally, I just decided, if I'm going to do this, I need to be able to do it myself from start to finish. There was no, it was very difficult to hand something over to somebody else and say, here, finish this for me, I've done my part. It didn't work for me. So I knew I needed a long arm so that I could finish what I started.
Mm. So you so you had the vision, you could see it in your mind what you wanted the quilt to look like, but being able to do a Vulcan mind meld. I grew up with Star Trek. They did a Vulcan mind meld thing, and you can't do that. Yeah.
Well, the problem is that long armers would hear me spit this stuff out, and they'd say, "Oh, sister, I'm not doing that."
Oh,
So,
okay.
I mean, I had, it wasn't just like the traditional quilting that I was looking for. I was looking for very custom, very different stuff. And they're like, nope, you're going to have to do that yourself. I said, okay. So that, if I was just looking to have edge to edge done, I probably could have continued sending that out, but that's not how my work spoke to me. So I needed something more.
Perfect. Okay, so the next question is whether you got your machine specifically to do a business, or if the business was more of a way to finance your fabric habit. It sounds like mostly you wanted to be able to finish your own quilts. Where did the business side come in?
So it's a funny thing that once you have a Gammill, you're like the Pied Piper of quilting, and people will come to you whether you're looking for the business or not. And it was very shortly after I got my Gammill, people were knocking at my door. Hey, Valerie, I see you got a new long arm. Would you be interested in quilting something for him? And I had very little experience, so I said no to no one. I took in every quilt, anything, just to be able to get the experience. I mean, I could quilt on my own stuff all day long, but being able to do the real world stuff like the edge to edge, that's doing that for other people. That's where I got my experience.
Hmm. Just because it was a lot more quilts. If you were only doing your
Mhm.
own quilts, that's what, 5, 10, 15 a year max.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a very prolific quilter. I make a
I'm
lot.
a
I
slow
make a
peak.
lot of art quilts, but yeah, to be able to quilt for other people really kind of added to that in a way. I'll say like this, because as you can see behind me, what I make is art quilts, but what I do for other people can be more traditional style, custom, and edge to edge, and those at the time were not things that I did a lot of. So if I wanted to get that kind of experience, like how to do a queen size custom, those quilts would have to come through my door, or I wouldn't have been able to gain that experience because I wasn't making giant quilts. I was making little art pieces.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, so then when you decided to replace your first machine with the Gammill, how is it the Gammill that you chose as opposed to something else? I mean, you'd already kind of made a mistake that you regretted.
Yep.
How did you make sure that the Gammill was the right choice? How did you end up there?
I went to a quilt show at the AQS in Des Moines, and I played with every single machine that they had there because I wanted to get a feel for what the machine. I already knew what I didn't like, and I was looking for something that was going to be more intuitive. Now, my first machine was a freehand only; it did not have a computer. But I have a background. I have a degree in photography and graphic design. So it really made sense for me to look for something that had the computer side of it because I already spoke that language. I already knew how it worked. And so when it came down to it and looking at the Gammill versus the other brands, Gammill was based off of a Windows-based operating system, which I already knew. So I knew that that part would translate fine. I wouldn't have to learn how the OS worked. And then the graphic side, the way Creative Studio was written, even the earliest version that I came in on, which I believe was 2 point something, it was very easy for me to take my knowledge that I already had from graphic design to be able to operate that system. It was that close to what I already knew. So I felt like I had a little bit of an edge coming in to work on a Gammill. I could just sit down and it was easy.
Mhm. Um, so do you have the same machine today that you bought way back then, or have you upgraded or done other things?
So let me tell you about this. The first Gammill that I got was an 18. It was very pretty. It was purple, 12-foot frame. It was beautiful. She spoke to me, and then one day she says, "I'm not big enough." So I traded her in, and I got a bigger one 2 years later. Well, 4 years later, I traded her in for the next size up. And then just last June, I upgraded again for a bigger size. So I mean, I would have to tell people really and truly, if you're going to do this, just go ahead and get the bigger machine because you're going to want it later.
Yeah, I would also say too, I'll chime in on that, that when you put your money into a Gammill,
Mm.
you could argue whether perhaps gold bars is a safer place to put your money. Maybe it is a safer place to put it in gold bars, but a thief could break in and take your gold bars very easily. He's going to have a hard time taking your Statler.
So
And
true.
whenever you are, tired of quilting or they're wheeling you off to the old people's home, that money that you parked in your Gammill machine, you can get the vast majority of it right back out of it. And if you put a little more money in to get the bigger machine, when it comes time to trade it in or trade it up or hang up your quilting for good, that it's worth more because it's the more desirable machine that people want. So
Each time I've traded up and upgraded, I haven't really lost much money. I mean, I feel like I'm paying for the upgrade, um, but I feel like I've gotten my value back out of the machine for even what I'm trading in for. So
yeah,
I have not been disappointed yet.
yeah, it shocks a lot of people when they find that out, because whenever you trade up a boat or you trade up a car or you a lot of things, when you trade up, boy, it hits you in the pocketbook real hard, because this $45,000 car 2 years ago is worth half of that today,
Right.
and it's a real blow to the pocketbook. How did you know that there was enough long arm business available in your town to support another long arm quilter? Well, you didn't really judge that, did you?
I didn't, because I wasn't looking to quilt for other people initially, so I didn't even look at that aspect of it until after I had my machine. But once I had my machine and I saw what the need was, I didn't mind doing it, because I didn't always have something of my own to be working on. And I kind of looked forward to being able to quilt for others, to kind of fill in my empty time. If I didn't have something that was ready to be quilted, I could go ahead and quilt for somebody else and make some money, and learn something in the process.
Mhm. How did you come up with the money to buy the machine?
Another fun story. So, of course, I sold the very first one that I had. I sold that, and I took that money, and then I had this beautiful purple Harley that I loved, and I sold my motorcycle to make the down payment on my Gammill, along with the other money that I had, and that paid for about half of my machine, and then I financed the rest of it. And then the second upgrade, I didn't have to finance that one. I just paid for that. And then the third machine that I bought, I sold my brand new pickup truck to pay for, and my husband begged me not to sell the new pickup. He has his own truck, but mine was prettier. And but he was like, "No, we can just finance the Gamble." And I said, I don't really want to. I can, but it was just easier not to have that financial burden again. So I sold my pickup truck. I bought a different vehicle and paid for my machine outright, so I don't have to have a payment at all. There's no stress in doing that.
Yeah.
And I still have a very nice car. So
Yeah, just not that real shiny pickup that was nice.
no, now I have a new shiny Explorer instead of a new shiny F-150, but I can hold more quilts in the back of the Ford Explorer.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So, about how many hours per week do you spend quilting for yourself and for others? Is it half and half, or?
Um, it depends on the week, but I think that mostly I do between 15 and 20 hours a week for other people. And no matter what, no matter how busy I am, I save at least a day to a day and a half a week to be able to work on my own stuff. Because that is the whole reason why I bought this machine, was to be able to do stuff for myself. And shortly after I got set up here in Indiana, I worked for almost 3 weeks straight on everybody else's stuff, and it really kind of, put me down a little bit, because I
Kind of a
didn't get.
drag, huh?
Yeah, I didn't get the opportunity to work on my own stuff, and I could see it hanging back there, and I finally just said, I have to say, Saturdays and Sundays are my own day, and I can do Monday through Friday for other people, and I'm good
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
So
Well, you know what they say on the airplane, in the unexpected event of a loss of cabin pressure, put your own mask on first before
correct.
helping other people. And,
Yep.
if you don't do the things that bring you joy, you're not going to be any good to the people
Yep.
around you. And I learned that a lot later in life. You do have to take care of your own mental health.
Right, exactly. It is. Gammill is my therapy, and it's cheaper than the local therapist, so
A lot more fun, I'm sure.
for sure.
So your quilts are art quilts and they're custom quilts. Do you offer custom quilting to other people, or is it primarily edge to edge?
I offer both to other people. I do a fair amount of edge to edge and a fair amount of custom. I take in a lot of custom really from across the US, because there are so many areas where quilters in those other places are not willing to do custom, and here I am gladly saying, pick me, pick me.
Mhm.
And they'll send it to you because people still have a desire to have that kind of work done, and some people just simply are not willing to put in the time to do the hard work. Too many quilters, they want to take the easy money or the easy job, and they don't want to do the custom,
Hey,
but
now there's
I don't
nothing
mind.
wrong with easy money. I
No,
don't.
there's not. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the easy jobs, and they are very much appreciated. But as an artist, I also love the challenge
Yeah,
that I get from custom quilting, because it makes you think about what you're looking at and what's going to go where and what's going to fit in here. And ooh, if I do this, it'll make it look like this. And so for me, it's a challenge to my brain.
yeah. Um, what would you say your total charge for an average customer quilt is?
If you're talking about a queen size, let's say, 84 high 96-ish, you're looking at somewhere between 190 and 240, depending on what pattern they select. I gauge my edge to edge in 3 different categories. Unlike most people, some people really just charge one flat rate for edge to edge, but I keep mine in 3 different tiers. Very light, which would be the equivalent of a meander, a medium density, and then a high density. And so I have different price ranges for each one of those 3. And then custom quilting, I don't go simply by an edge to edge for custom quilting. I have kind of a hybrid that I use, which is a calculation of square inches, the complexity of the pattern selected, and the time spent. And so a queen size 84 by 96 can range anywhere from, say, 500 to almost 1100, depending on the class of patterns, or the complexity that they want to have done.
So Vida mentioned taking perhaps a week on an $1,100 quilt. Is that similar with yours?
Very much. And sometimes it takes me even a little bit longer. I mean, I've had some custom quilts on my frame for, 10 to 12 days. It just really depends on the complexity. And some just simply take more. And so, I only have one machine. So, I really have to be mindful of blocking off enough time to be able to manage that particular custom quilt from start to finish, because I don't have a backup machine to work with.
Gotcha. Um, what would you say for how many quilts you've done in your worst year and your best year, or just the dollars? How many dollars in the worst year and in the best year?
Probably previously, I would say that my worst year quilting was close to 20,000. And maybe that was about 150 to 160 quilts. My best year was 65,000 and closer to maybe 210 quilts. I say previously till now because this is probably going to go up as my worst year ever, simply because I've moved again, and I didn't just move across town or across the state. I moved from Arizona to Indiana, and so
Right, so you have to rebuild again.
correct. But you know, when you are, I think that when you're good at what you do, many of your customers will follow you no matter where. And so immediately once I got my machine set up, I had many of my Tucson quilters sending me quilts. So I haven't had any shortage of work since I got here, but I had almost 90 days where my machine was not set up and not usable yet. And you know, now of course I've got to get myself back out there and put my information back out in this area so that I can get people from the local area to come in. So
Gotcha.
this one is probably, I'm going to say if I had to forecast this year, I'm probably going to be under 19,000, give or take.
Yeah. What was the hardest part of growing your business the first time? We'll see about the second time.
Just getting people to take you seriously as a new quilter, because you know some of the hardest thing is, you know, people say, oh, just because you have a long arm you think you can do this kind of work, you know. So there was a lot of people that would second guess until you're able to show them how good you can do or what kind of work you can do. So I think just getting people to your door is really the biggest part of the challenge. But once you get a handful of good customers, so you get 5 good customers, each one of those people is going to say something amazing about what it is that you've done for them. And that word of mouth, they will tell 10 people, and they will, of those 10 people that they tell, you'll probably get business from at least 2 or 3 of them. And so that branches out, and before you know it,
Right.
you've got a clientele of 50 to 100 people.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, I mean, the hardest part is just simply getting people to bring their stuff to you.
Yeah. What's one change in technology that makes it easier today than it was when you started?
Well, I came into Gammill with version 2 point something. I want to say it was 2.3. So I have to say, with every new upgrade with CS, I see all these tools and I'm like, did you see what this can do? It's amazing, all of the stuff that they put in here. And every single new upgrade that they do, it makes things quicker, it makes things easier, it makes things just more functional. And so every time they upgrade, I just can't wait to get in there and play with the new toys and see what they do, because there's so much, you know, if they put out a tool that saves me 15 minutes on the placement of a pattern, man, that just, you know, that's huge. And you know, the ability to be able to edit patterns on our screen within CS, that is amazing. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've played with other companies' software, and I have to say that CS is hands down the easiest to use.
Mhm. Yep, I would agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Who was your biggest cheerleader or your support system as you started this?
Definitely my husband, because he is fearless. I can dream up all of these ideas, and it's like coffee cup conversations at 5 a.m. You know, I was thinking about buying this machine, and he's like, yeah, okay, just go for it, you know? And so he never tells me no. He's like, all right, let's see what you can do. And it's just really nice to be able to have that kind of support behind me. And like I said, absolutely fearlessly, he's just always standing behind me, rooting me on. And then next to him, I would say, I don't know if you want to call them cheerleaders, but really just the friends that I have met along I'll say my Gammill journey, people that I've met either at like the sugar conventions when we had that, and on the Gammill Facebook page, because you meet some fantastic people with so many different skill levels, and you make some really great friends there, and it's so nice to be able to have those people behind you that you can just quick go to the computer, send them a message, and ask them a quick question and see what they would do, or how they would how do you address this issue. It's
Mhm.
like there's no shortage of people, one, that are willing to help, and two, that are knowledgeable enough. So
Yeah.
just a lot of good friends.
You had mentioned the software updates, and one of the things that causes a lot of activity and questions is whenever we release a new version of software, there's always the early adopters that jump in right away and download the free update, and they start playing right away with the new tools. And then there's the ones that come along in the middle, and then the latecomers that come along a year or two later. And they're like, I know I missed out when everybody else was upgrading, but I finally just did it. So it's pretty cool to have that support system, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I've never let software scare me off. I mean, I just look at it like a good challenge, but I know that with every upgrade they put out, there's going to be something better in there than what we had before. And so far I have not been disappointed in that thought. And so I mean, uh, I love everything that they've added as they've added it. It's just been amazing.
Cool. What kind of impact has the quilting money and the control over your personal schedule made in your life?
A lot, because initially I bought this to be able to quilt for myself, but then when I realized that I could do this for money and that people would pay me to do this for them, it allowed me to be able to create freely without having to worry about the financial aspect of what it is that I want to create. But I mean, I've paid off 2 houses, I've paid off 3 machines, we still have nice vehicles. There's a lot of income generated from this that I would not have had any other way. That in the personal freedom, if I don't want to quilt today and I want to go out and play and do something else, then I can do that. I get to make my own schedule. If my husband wants to take off and do a weekend trip someplace, we can go do that.
Mhm.
No other job is going to give you that kind of freedom.
Now, I feel obliged to point out that when you're working, you are working, right?
Correct.
It's not easy money.
No, it's not all easy. I mean, but it's all fun. You can go to work and still be fun, right?
That's right. Yep. Yep. What is something that you wish someone would have told you when you first started?
Ooh, number one, that all quilts that come through your door are not going to be flat and square. And that you really should not apologize for the price that you put on your quilting. Um, it took me a long time to be able to wrap my head around this concept, but custom quilting, that's a whole animal all of its own. That can be a little pricey, and sometimes people will just be like, I can't believe it's going to cost that much. So after a couple years of being, letting people talk me down a little bit, I finally came to the realization that what I needed to do when price quoting for custom was, people would tell me what they want, and I would give them an estimate for the kind of custom that they were looking for. But alongside of that custom quote, I would also give them a quote for a medium density edge to edge. And I would present those quotes to them both at the very same time and say, this is what you asked for in custom, but this is what it costs. This is how it compares to doing edge to edge. And if they would say to me then, oh, well, I can't afford custom. Oh, okay, that's okay. I also offer this very nice edge to edge. And so you get to choose what it is you want to pay.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of the anxiety out of having to price quote for people. It puts the ball in their court, and they get to choose how much money they want to spend on each piece without feeling like they're locked into, it's going to cost $750. Well, custom takes a long time, and so it is going to be expensive. And should you choose not to go that route, I can absolutely offer you a very nice edged edge.
Valerie, that's a brilliant approach. I have to say, I think that sometimes people who do custom a little bit here and there,
Hmm.
they've had a customer that paid a lot for that custom work, and they never could figure out why she was grumpy about it afterwards. And I
Yep.
think that sometimes people, by the time you've spent time with them and you've put together the proposal and everything, and now they're looking at $1,000 bill, I
Mhm.
suspect that sometimes they are socially pressured internally to not say what they really think, which is, oh my goodness, that's way too much money. I should
Yep.
never have asked you for that. I can't do $1,000, or I don't want to do $1,000 on this
Right.
bill. And so I kind of wonder if sometimes when people are presented with just one option, they pressure themselves internally to accept
Mm.
that option, but they really didn't want it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
later they're an unhappy, sort of unhappy customer
Right.
because because of their own.
The other thing is about that, and some people, I will say piecers, they will bring you a quilt that they've been working on for a very long time, and because they've been working on piecing this quilt for such a long time, they think in their mind that it has to be done with custom quilting. But as the long arm quilter, you have to be able to look at that piece and be able to tell them honestly whether or not this piece is going to benefit from the time and the expense of long arm quilting. Because if the quilting isn't going to show because of either the piecing patterns or the fabrics that are chosen, you should really be willing to tell them honestly, I know you think you had custom in mind, but it's not going to show, and you're going to spend all of this money to custom quilt this, and it may not be benefited greatly from this. So you have to be able to offer your expertise to the people that may not know any differently, and so explain to them what they're going to see on that, and if they still want custom, by all means do it. But I don't want to spend two weeks quilting somebody's quilt and charge them $800, and then they come back and they look at it and they say, I know you custom quilted it, but I don't see it.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to be able to tell them that
Yeah.
ahead of time.
Hang on a sec. I covered up my next question. So what advice would you give someone who is wanting to do basically what you've done and kind of follow that same path? And is that something that somebody could do today, just like you did?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you have the will and the desire to be able to work for yourself, you have that kind of discipline, jump right in and do it. But, make sure, number one, make sure you're getting the machine that you want with the features that you want and the size that you want, because it's easier to buy big now than to trade up later. And I mean, I can say that I've upgraded twice now. I wish I would have bought the bigger machine the first time. But get what you want, spend the money, and then you know, work for others, but remember to take the time to also work for yourself. Take the time to do your own thing. Go to the quilt guilds, share your work, show people, make the friends, and make those personal connections with people. And that is going to be the happy side of things. Being able to show your work and hear people give you kudos, and that looks amazing. That's what we all want to hear.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Thank you. I'm gonna look at a couple questions that I've gotten in the, from people that are listening. Do you include the binding for the quilts? And for that, I kind of wonder if the question is related to custom quilts, because
I only include binding if they are asking me to do the binding, but generally speaking, that is an additional charge. And if they ask for binding, I can give them a quote for that, but I send that out to a third-party person. I do not do bindings here myself, just simply because I'm one person and I do not have the time. But I always find somebody in my local area who enjoys doing binding, and that's what they want to do. And so I call that a subcontractor for me. And I send that out, and so I can offer it to them. I just don't do it myself.
yeah, certainly different people have different preferences on
Sure.
what they want their binding to look like. And
Correct.
I know for myself, I mean, I'm not even a real quilter, right? I've only done a few, but I know for myself, I'm very particular about the way I want it to look. You
Yes.
know? So, fantastic. Okay, well, gosh, we ran a little longer than we'd planned. We went 15 minutes over, but as always, I just want to thank you guys for sharing your stories, for helping to inspire others. There are people who are watching this who are contemplating making kind of a big life change, and it's scary to make that kind of a change. And you sharing your experiences as you kind of blazed the path ahead of them is going to help them to believe maybe that they can do this and that they will survive and it will be okay and it'll be good on the other side. So anything else you guys would like to say to our viewers before we sign off for the night?
Do it. Happy quilting.
Absolutely. Happy quilting.
All right, thank you guys so much, and
Thank you.
have a nice evening.
You too.
Good night.
Good night.